Hi everybody, it's Alexander here. So welcome to an audiobook for my first published book, Call of the Void. It's part of the Empire of the Black Suns series, which will have 4 books in the end. 3 of them are written, and this really is, I guess, the lead up to the release of the second book, which should be somewhere around the middle of the year, and the third one will come towards the end of this year. So the structure of this audiobook is that and all the other books actually written here, is that they're separated into parts called episodes. So within this book, episode 1 covers chapters 1 through 8, episode 2 is chapters 9 through 15, episode 3 is chapters 16 through 22, and episode 4 is chapters 23 through to 25. So all of the chapters and episodes might not be up when you are listening to this right now, but I will be uploading them on an episode by episode basis. What's funny to note as well, and that I'm about halfway through having recorded this audiobook, is that so many of the events that occur in the first 7 chapters are plucked from events that have happened in my life, and I forget that I've included them all in there. And I suppose it's done to try and make the first sort of bit of the book feel more grounded, but it's also pretty bloody embarrassing when I think that, the character's essentially an author insert for the first quarter of this book, and people definitely know that. Anyone who knows me well enough knows that. So have fun, and my voice will shine through because I'm literally telling the story. The other thing as well is that, the first cut of this book was written when I was 18, and some of the character dialogue, especially between the male characters, I haven't edited since the initial cut. The reason being is that I felt it was true to the book and the characters to preserve the inner machinations of an 18-year-old's thought process. So some of the dialogue borders on cringy. And I suppose the point I'm trying to get across with all this is just to remember that, despite the fact that some of the events in this book ring pretty true to things I've gone through, and despite the fact the character can ring true to, myself at 18, 19, just to remember that these are characters, and the points of view represented are more or less just to build them as characters, whether that's good or bad. So I hope that people don't think that some of the things said reflect upon me necessarily. It's more or less trying to position you to like or dislike a certain character based on their actions. So that's, the point of literature. Anyway, covering my ass aside and preparing you for what is probably a very cringy experience in your first few chapters of listening, I sincerely hope you enjoy, and I do love the fact that you've come to have a listen, so please listen on. Now, I don't know if audiobooks generally start with acknowledgements because I've never listened to one before, but I'm going to start this one with acknowledgements just to pay respects to the people who I believe deserve it for helping me with this. So, firstly, anybody who actually read the book initially, big props to you. I think those numbers are pretty low, but hopefully more people will listen to this. First individual acknowledgement goes to Joanna Gogos, who is the editor for this book. She did a fantastic job, really helped me to understand where I was failing in my writing, and hopefully we turned that around a little bit. Can't recommend her services enough. Secondly, Aisha deserves a big shout out. She hosted the book initially on Lilydale Publishing, so that was really cool of her to do that for me. Next acknowledgement goes to a good friend of mine, Imogen Holdsworth. She read all of the draft books in succession and gave me good feedback and really got involved with the story. So for giving this thing the momentum I really wanted to have, thank you, Imogen. It was due to her that I pumped out the 3rd book in 3 months, which was a pretty huge feat. Nextly, Andrew Wally, who was the original sort of yes man from year 10 when this idea was in its infancy. He read the initial cut of this thing, which is absolute trash, and I'm definitely not letting anyone read anymore. And he has always been a good friend and a good supporter of this series. Speaking of good friends and supporters, Ollie Thomas deserves a good mention. He was my mentor figure for a while, and he is now just a good friend of mine, but he has inspired me to continue down this path of fantasy and creativity and making these sort of stories. So Ollie, thank you for the inspiration. Next, and I suppose this might sound somewhat weird or controversial, but bear with me. This whole book was born in the fires of the breakup from my first love. And so to that, for giving me the motivation to write it, and for inspiring actually a lot of the ideas of the magic system, I got to give a shout out to Amanda Gianaris. It's her quirky demeanor to life, which has inspired a lot of the magic that I decided to write in here. So thank you, Amanda. This one is also another odd acknowledgement, but I'm throwing this out to Fat Freddy's Drop, who are my favourite band. They're a reggae band from New Zealand. It was in the lowest depths of my soul. In the midst of that breakup, I was handed a CD by them, and that album was based on a true story, which is their first studio album. Now, listening to that band totally changed my life and my outlook on life and my taste in music and everything. But the lyrics from that album, in particular the song Ray Ray, inspired the ideology which I set forth in this book and just totally changed my worldview. So thank you, Fat Freddy's Drop. And if you're watching this, which I don't know, maybe it got passed around to you, I play trumpet and I would die to be in one of your gigs. Anyway, far-fetched fantasies aside, let's get into a different far-fetched fantasy and start with chapter 1. So click next and get onto it. But thank you so much for coming to listen as well. I really appreciate it.